All right, Kara, what's next?
NMR or NMS or whatever we want to call it these days. And it looks like I'm going to do it. I'm trying to find the paperwork that goes out with everybody's emails. I can probably just talk about this. Everybody gets it if you're an Exchequer. Is everybody using their OnTier accounts? Their OnTier, it's your Bernie chapter name .exchequer@ontier.org.
Don't have one yet, not a branch yet.
Right. Hopefully by the time you guys start having accounts, you'll or start having events, paid events, you guys will have that in place. As everybody, I hope everybody knows, I stepped down as the NMR deputy in January, and it was taken over by Adelaide. She's in Dragon's Lair, or Adelheidi. She's in Dragon's Lair. So make sure that you're checking those invoices and you're not sending them to me anymore in Tacoma. They actually need to go to Bremerton. But don't worry, if they do come to me, they do get deposited. NMR is something that we are required to pay by corporate. It is not something that is, it's required by Kingdom because corporate requires it. It covers the insurance that they pay for our events. And that is paid by a non-member who attends an event. It is a $5 fee discount if you are a member. So I just wanted to cover, I noticed that some events are starting to charge for youth again. And so I was asked the question on if youth have to pay NMR. If youth are paying a full site fee, the same amount as an adult, they do need to be charged an NMR. You need to keep that $5 on there. If you're discounting for youth, like half the fee that you charge for an adult, then you do not need to submit NMR for that youth. So example, we have an event coming up or a Kingdom event is, $30 and a youth could be 15. That whole 15 stays with the Bernie. You don't count them in your NMR. You're only counting for your adults that attend. Each month in your email, you'll get an invoice. Each month you have an event. At the beginning of the month, you'll get an invoice. And that invoice will have a due date on it. You have 10 business days to get that reported to Kingdom. Now, it does take longer for mail to get from Canada to the US, to us down here in the US and OnTier. It takes about 10 to 15 days. So make sure you're emailing the NMR deputy letting them know I had 30 or we had 300 people, 300 adults attend, and 25 was the NMR collected. 25 of those were NMR, and then the amount. And don't worry, we do when we deposit our checks, they give us the exchange rate, so we figure that out when the check comes. But just letting us know, so that way we can mark you as reported within that 10 business days if the check doesn't get to us within that 10 business days.
Hey, Kira, real quick, I got a question for you.
Yeah,
On the discounted price when you're talking about children, I know that there are branches in Canada that do a $5 discount for seniors or students. Are those included as a discount, or is it just full prices?
those are not included in the discount. It does say adults in the thing. So if you're discounting for seniors, you would not, you still have to count them as paying the NMR, because if you're discounting for seniors, you would discount them $5, but if they were a member, you would be discounting them 10, right?
That's the question.
That's what I would think. So if it was 30 for a non-member and 25 for a member, and then you have you're a senior and you still get $5 off no matter what. So they would be getting, yeah. They would still have to pay. You would still count that in your NMR total. Practices, anything that doesn't have a fee. If you get an invoice and you're having an event that has no fees, like I know the Inlands has a Yule, that is no charge to their members, to the populace, you would if you get an invoice, just email back and say there's no fee for this event. We're not charging for this event at this time. And she'll just mark it as a free event. That's not an issue. We do try to look that up as much as possible, making sure that your event stewards are keeping your Kingdom events up to date on the Kingdom event calendar really, really helps. There is a spot to put fees in, and I know sometimes it's hard to be able to have access to that. The event stewards have been having some problems. Hopefully that will be resolved soon and everything will be able to be updated accordingly. Any more questions? Actually, a really short conversation. I guess we will go ahead and move on to baronial reviews and what is needed, or like financial reviews and what is needed when we when you get asked to schedule a review with the Exchequer.
Okay, hello again. So I'm going to share my screen here. I actually have a PowerPoint set up for this one. Okay, so SCA book reviews. First of all, book reviews should not be something that strikes terror into your heart. That's not the focus. That's not the purpose of a book review at all. Okay. Wait, I've got my tiles here right over there we go. Okay, so what is the purpose of a book review? It provides checks and balances for what you're doing on the site level. It's primarily a review of your administrative record keeping and compliance with the minimum standards for such. I mean, your numbers are right if your report is balancing generally. So the next step is to make sure that you've got the proper backups and you're retaining the proper things that back up all the income and expenses that you've been booking throughout the year. And what I really like about book reviews is it identifies those expectations for record keeping and in essence become part of your job description. If you aren't sure, like, should I keep copies of this or not? Look at the book review checklist, because it will tell you what the expectation is when Kingdom or Kingdom Deputy comes out to do your book review. So why me? A lot of you are probably thinking that when it happens, but reviews are really not punitive actions. They're intended to ensure that each branch is properly maintaining their records and that new officers understand their role. My recommendation is that frequent reviews ensure continuity between officers, and they ensure errors and omissions are identified early and redirected to the proper way. All right, frequency. I believe the policy is that your book review should occur every 2 years or whenever the office changes hands. The thing is, I know we lost momentum on our book reviews during the shutdown, and there's oftentimes staffing issues. We're all spread very far out, makes it really hard to get a reviewer off to the four corners of the kingdom, and there's only so much in the budget for travel and things like that. What I'm seeing is after the shutdown, so many of us have become a lot more comfortable using Zoom and those types of electronic meetings. So being able to do the book review electronically is quite helpful and is more expedient. But when you are leaving office, you definitely contact the Kingdom Exchequer to schedule a book review. So who should attend? Well, obviously the reviewer, whether that's a Kingdom Exchequer, the Deputy Exchequer, or somebody she's deputized to do that job. If it's a case to where the review is happening because office is changing hands, both the incoming and outgoing branch exchequers should be in attendance. And there should be another witness. And that witness does need to be acceptable to both parties, both the reviewer and to the branch. In some cases, I've seen that witness be one of the coronets, or in other times it was the exchequer deputy. It doesn't, who it is doesn't matter, it's just so long as everybody's in agreement this is a good person to be a witness that they trust.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
It's Anastasia. I am stepping up as the Thierry Principality Exchequer in June. So I'm just curious, because we do talk, a lot of the conversations today have been kingdom to branch. Where if it does the principality fit into that?
Well, I would think principality would be doing your book reviews.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, where was I? Yeah. Okay. So thankfully, society has provided us all with a very nice checklist. It's very clear and concise on what you need. There's a copy of it located at ontier.org under Exchequer Resources. There's a lot of copies of things and forms we've talked about located under Exchequer Resources. There's also a copy on the SCA webpage as well. And what's nice about this form is there's no surprises. You are going to know just by looking at this form what sort of things the reviewer is going to look for, because the reviewer is going to use this exact same form. And you should be, of course, referring to it when you're preparing for your own book review or as a reference throughout your term. So now I'm going to go through each of the sections of this review form, just kind of touch on some of the things. And some of you may find that your branch has never done this, and oops, now we need to start, or in some cases you might find that maybe you're doing way more than necessary, and you can dial it back and make things administratively a little bit easier for yourself as well. So in each of these sections of this checklist, there is a reference to the part of society financial policy that this is drawn from, where each section is drawn from. Like this comes from section 1. It's on financial reporting. So your reviewer is going to want to see that you have financial reports for the last 3 years, or if you're a branch that hasn't been was incepted less than 3 years ago, you'd have however many you're supposed to have by then. They're also going to look to make sure that you have copies of your quarterly reports for the last 3 years. They're going to look to make sure that your ending numbers from the previous year match the starting numbers for the next year. And we kind of talked about that. That's important. And then, of course, we all know that every branch does cumulative, not sequential. In fact, I'm wondering if they're ever going to update this form and just take sequential out, because if you're using the newer form, they've taken out the question of which one to use. So, all right. Next section. This is about your warrant. Is your warrant up to date? Are your deputies' warrants up to date? And what about the membership status? Well, presumably you would be a member, but is your deputy a member? So segregation of duties. This section is really kind of things we do naturally because we've all been trained to do them. Like the Exchequer is not solely in charge of expense approval. You don't make those decisions on your own. You are funding expenses either from an approved budget that was already approved by the financial committee or from an action in which the financial committee just approved an expense outside of the budget. But it's never solely your choice. The Exchequer should not hold any other branch office. Now, there may be select occasions where there are exceptions made, but that's on a case-by-case basis, and you really have to work with your Kingdom Exchequer to make sure that she's comfortable with an additional office you may be considering taking. They're also going to want to look to see that funds are not commingled in anyone's personal or business accounts. So, I saw a situation once or heard of one where an autocrat took the gate proceeds home, deposited them in her account, then wrote a check and deposited that check for the lump sum into the branch's bank account. Fortunately, everything lined up, but that was a big no-no. You should not do that. It goes directly into our account and stays out of other people's accounts. Another person who needs to be warranted would be your Chamberlain. So if you have a Chamberlain, that person needs to be warranted. And you guys do need to remember, if you do not have a Chamberlain, then those Chamberlain duties fall to you. Because the assets of the barony are all part of things that we administer, whether they're cash assets or non-cash assets. All right, so the reviewer is also going to want to know whether or not you have access to training, access to resources. Do you have the handbook available, either printed or online? If your kingdom's required any specialized training like Exchequer 101, you're going to look to see that you've taken that training as well. I don't believe we have required training. Maybe we should for new exchequers, but there's definitely training opportunities given multiple times throughout the year. And you should be making an effort, even if you've already been trained, you should be making an effort to pop in. Lots of updates happen, refreshers, reminders, and it's just, kind of nice fellowship too, to kibitz with us all. All right, bank accounts and signers. Now, this is kind of a big one, right? So the reviewer is going to, one, check to make sure that bank accounts are maintained and set up according to Kingdom and Society policies. One of the first things they look at is, does the account name match what Society requires? And Society requires actually that your accounts are SCA Inc., Barony of Happy Valley, or SCA Inc., Shire of Mud Flats, whatever, but SCA Inc. needs to be in there in the name. And there are no subsidiaries in Kingdom of Ontario. In case you're ever wondering, or you think you might be one, you are not. The other thing to make sure is that all signers on your account are members. That's really important. Sometimes we've got the signers are getting kind of stale, kind of old. Somebody doesn't play anymore. They're no longer a member. It is really imperative that when that happens, that you take that person off your account and go about adding a new person to replace them. And we all know changing bank accounts is a great big pain in the neck, but what happens is as those people kind of stop playing or aren't available, you can very quickly find yourself with only 2 signers left on your account. And that, if one person goes down, now you're out of compliance and cannot write checks at all. So keep up on that. And it's not uncommon for the reviewer to ask you to show proof that your signers are members. So it's a good idea to once a year take electronic copies of their membership cards. Ledger maintenance and bank account reconciliation. Now, we really talked a lot about that earlier here, but they are going to be looking to make sure that you are filing quarterly reports and that your bank statements are reconciled monthly. Best thing you can do is use your SharePoint account or OneDrive and upload this stuff into there, especially if we're considering doing your book review electronically.
How many copies are we required to have of our reports?
Depends. Right, so you need, if there's okay, as far as a report goes, every page that has a signature line, you need to have signed copy. But quite often, you're saving that signed copy as a PDF, and you still got your working copy, which is the Excel form. But that's all you need to keep. You don't need to keep more.
Right, but how many electronic copies? Where should those electronic copies be? I mean, obviously, you don't want to just keep it on the thumb drive.
No, I would say put them in your 365 account or Microsoft account associated with your Office, creating subfolders, trying to organize it as much as you can, because you have to remember that tool gets handed off to the next guy. So you want it to make sense too.
It was required that if we were storing digitally, now I don't know if this is still the same, it was required to be in two places.
Oh.
One online and then one not, because what happens if you lose access to the online?
You're right. I had forgotten about that.
But I don't know if that's changed or not. Probably.
I don't know if it
I
has
think
either.
they've clarified it because of the 365 setup that, but I still have multiple copies because I'm retentive
do I.
of that.
Yeah.
I know. I kept my hard
backups to my
copies.
backups.
Yeah, I work better off hard copies than I do off the screen. So, yeah. All right. So what we learned today is, until further notice, maintain a hard copy in addition to electronic copies. For a book review point of view, having electronic copies could make it a lot easier for us to do your review electronically. All right, section G, transaction documentation. This is, in my experience doing book reviews, this is one of the areas where some branches struggle. So the reviewer is going to look to make sure that you've got documentation for all deposits, that they're made within the required timeframes. Documentation of the deposits. One, we do have a deposit summary form that you can attach your bank statement or your deposit slip to, and that will work just fine. That details out what the deposit was for. You've got the deposit slip showing, all the check numbers, everything like that. That should be enough. He's also got to verify your bank balance and the general ledger have been reconciled for the last 3 months. Many of us, or I've seen many branches who, since reports are due quarterly, they really wait until March to reconcile January and February also. I really recommend that you not do that. You should be doing it monthly. What I found for myself is doing it monthly. If I make a mistake, I only have to go back through 30 days worth of activity to figure out my mistake. If I wait until the end of the quarter, I'm now looking for mistakes through 3 months worth of activity. So it's a good idea from that standpoint, plus it's required. So then there's also, they're going to look for receipt documentation for approved expenses. So they're going to ask to see the last at least $5 receipts and make sure that they match what was entered into the quarterly report. They're going to look to make sure you have backup as well. Advanced documentation. So if you advance someone funds, whether it's $500 to a feastocrat so that they can buy food for a feast, there should be some form of documentation, not just $300 to so-and-so. It should be something, whether it's a budget that shows how much it is, or an email from the autocrat requesting this amount, an email from the gate person requesting this amount for a gate seed, all of that. That will work as far as backing up your need to advance funds to somebody else. And, when you advance them, that's considered a receivable because you are expecting back from that person either receipts or cash or both. Right, because they asked for $250, they only spent $225. Now they owe you $225 worth of receipts for that food, and another $25 cash to return to the account. And that's what the review is going to be looking for, is how you reconciled that advance and was it reconciled within required timeframes. All right, event activity. And also another area where it's easy to have a disconnect that you're not even aware you have until you have your book review. So the reviewer is going to look for, make sure that you have event reports and NMR reports for every event that your property did during the review term. They're going to select at least one event per year and go over everything. They're going to confirm and make sure the income and expenses match what was in your report. And the same thing for the income. They're going to look to make sure that the starting cash for the gate was actually recorded correctly as a receivable and not recorded as income. And again, if there were deposits for the site, were they recorded correctly on the quarterly financial report before and after the event? And that's where you as an exchequer, you really need to make sure you understand when you are shelling out money up front for a site fee, is it a down payment on the site or is it a security deposit? And Jeanette talked about those things too. If you're paying money and then it's going to get used to offset the site fee, that's a down payment. Whereas if you're giving money and it's going to be returned for you to you less damages, if there are any, then that's a deposit, that's a receivable you're expecting to come back. Financial committee documentation. Again, this is also an area where it's really easy to have disconnects. Your minutes, your financial committee minutes are either printed in the files or saved electronically. You should have minutes for every financial committee meeting or decisions made by the financial committee. Same thing if it's non-ordinary business, like you had to do and cut a check on an emergency basis. Everybody agreed to it online, but now you're going to ratify that by reading it into the minutes of your next meeting. And whether or not budgets are kept in the file. You should have budgets. Everybody should have budgets. If your financial committee has already approved a budget for a person and that officer comes to you and wants to spend part of their budget, you've already got approval of the expense. You don't need to go to the financial committee again because it was approved by a budget. But if it's not approved by the budget, then you should go to your financial committee for have them vote on whether or not to pay it. And back to financial committees. It is your responsibility as exchequer to make sure that your minutes are taken. It's very hard if you're leading the financial committee to take minutes yourself and to do it accurately. So you should appoint somebody else. In some branches, the chronicler will take the minutes of both Curia and financial committee. Some branches have separate people for both, but you really need to make sure that you are covering yourself by having accurate minutes taken about what was decided. Financial policies. So they're going on, are you aware of the financial policies that govern what you do? They're going to look to see, is your branch financial policy written and has it been approved by both your financial committee and Kingdom? And they're going to look for the last update for the group policy. We all have requirements to update our policies, I believe, biannually. And in the past 5 or 6 or 7 years, there's been a number of changes to society financial policy that really should be incorporated into your own. So if your policy is older, you really do need to update it. And I would recommend reaching out either to another neighboring branch or even Kingdom. They can give you lots of good advice on how to word things, or recommendations on language to use. And there's also a checklist available that tells you what are the minimum requirements for financial policy. Special purpose and dedicated funds. Now, not every branch has these, but if you do, you need to have written fund purposes and that define the uses and that they're being followed. And so an example would be, I get you, and it said, don't box yourself into a corner. Don't say, we have a special fund, it's to raise money for a pavilion. Bam, that's it. Ending it like that makes it so that if you raise $2,500, but you only spent $2,400, you now have $100 that has been completely restricted. You can't roll it back into your operating account. You can't spend on anything else, because the way you wrote the fund for this was it's for a pavilion. The best thing to do is leave yourself an out and say any extra funds will be returned to the general operating account or the general account once the use is done or the purchase is made. So if you do have a special fund, the reviewer will want to look at it to make sure that all expenses applied to it were in line with the policy and correct for that account. And I think there are a few branches I've seen that do have some funds, coronet travel funds, things like that. So controlling disbursements. This is always a biggie, right? We always want to make sure when we're cutting checks to people that we've covered ourselves, that the financial committee has approved of the expenses in the checks that you've written. So all disbursements, of course, are made by check. You never hand cash out of a till to somebody to reimburse them. And they're made out to a person or a business. You never, ever, ever write a check out to cash. And then what they're going to do is also select several checks, make sure the check has 2 signatures, and that the amount of the check matches the receipts that were turned in. So if you have somebody who brings you a check request and they've added up a bunch of receipts and totaled it for you, you know what? I see more mistakes in that area, and usually they are inadvertently shorting themselves. So I recommend that you double check the math before you actually cut the check. Cash controls. They're going to look to make sure that you've got written procedures for running gate and for other funds that you take in. And usually your financial committee covers that, or your financial policy, I'm sorry. Asset management. So this is a biggie, especially if you don't have a Chamberlain and it's fallen on you. You know, our non-cash assets are really important to us. In many cases, fundraising was done. Somebody made it and donated it. Oh, I see a question. Yes, Malik.
Hey, come on. What are those SFP numbers?
That stands for Society Financial Policy, Section 13. So what that is doing, it's referencing where in society's financial policy, the requirement to do this comes from.
Okay. Oh, by the way, it's pronounced Malik.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
All right. So your reviewer is going to look to make sure that you have a written list of all equipment or non-cash assets, as well as maintenance procedures for special items. All right. They're going to record or look for the last date of a physical inspection or some sort of inventory of all equipment owned by the group was done too. So you do need to have regular inventories. I see a lot of branches who will take inventory at the beginning of event season and after event season. Some do it, you know, twice a year in specific months. But it should happen. It should happen regularly. You should have written procedures that define when it's appropriate to retire something and toss it out. What constitutes something that's beyond its useful life or unusable, because people get funny about this. You toss out a beat up old chess table, you find out that the original founding baron of your branch actually made that thing, you know, and now people are all mad at you for throwing it out. So even though, as far as you could tell, it was unusable, you couldn't even tell it was a chess table. It was so old and beat up. So those types of things, you really want to make sure that you've got clear guidance written down somewhere on how your branch is going to handle that. And correspondence, all right? So they're going to look to ensure that written correspondence is answered promptly and correctly. And I don't believe that there is an absolute hard rule for how quickly you should answer emails. I know when I was Kingdom Exchequer, I had a 72-hour rule. If I don't get a response within 3 days, I'm pinging somebody on Facebook. You know, but your branch may have a shorter one. I mean, some branches have this written down, like all officers will respond to written correspondence within 48 hours. Whatever, it needs to be a reasonable time frame. And they're going to look to make sure that you are meeting that time frame, that you're not ignoring people or leaving people hanging too long. We all get busy, and sometimes it happens, but it shouldn't as a practice. Oh, so this section here would be, let's say there was action items that came out of the last book review for your branch. And the Kingdom reviewer is going to have a copy of that, even if you don't, and it wasn't in the records that were passed to you. So they're going to look to see, have those action items been completed? Hopefully those action items won't be a surprise for you, and they already have been completed. All right, so these last two sections are where they kind of sum everything up, right? So we're talking about at the end of the review, did they come away with some action plans? You will, from now on, the branch will reconcile its bank accounts monthly, or from now on, the branch will maintain hard copy backups of all expenses or deposits, things like that. Or this is usually what most book reviews leave with an action plan to have the Barony update their financial policy because it's outdated. And in that case, there would be a due date, because not open end like do this from now on. It's like this one thing needs to be done by a certain date. And because we don't want our exchequers who work so hard to feel beat up from this process, especially if there are, omissions identified. We always like to end on a happy note and provide commendations. There may have been one or two things that were wrong, but there were so many things you're doing right. And want to make sure that that's recorded and you get, your kudos. So I was trained by Jeanette. So as she mentioned, people do get funny about money. And, there's a lot more to being an exchequer than just balancing your report. And proper documentation of financial transactions is really important. My recommendation is that outgoing exchequers should schedule a book review at the end of their term, and that will help establish a benchmark for the condition of the files you turn over to the new exchequer. All right. It also gives an incoming exchequer a chance to also learn what's required, why it's required. Sometimes exchequers don't understand why the prior exchequer did a thing and they think it's overkill, so they stop doing it. Well, no, they were doing it because it was required. So an incoming exchequer will walk away with knowledge of what's expected of them and direction on how to remedy those errors and omissions going forward. And, first and foremost, proper documentation of all income and expenses really is your CYA. That is how you cover yourself. So you at any time when somebody says, why was this check dispersed? You can show them why and have good documentation for it. But that's it. I mean, book reviews, like I said, they shouldn't be scary, but I would encourage all of you to try to back up as many of your files as possible electronically, because it will expedite Kingdom's ability to perform your book review when your office changes. Yes, Alina.
Just a quick question. How often should we do a book review?
Well, I believe the policy is every 2 years or when the office changes hands.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Always a good thing to know.
Okay, any more questions, anybody?
Elena actually put in that one a year on inventory now to be sent to the Chamberlain by the end of May. I know that's something that she's been working on getting into effect to get those Chamberlains to be reporting that inventory up to her as the Kingdom Chamberlain, and she has spreadsheets for those. So if your Chamberlain doesn't have that spreadsheet, they should be reaching out to her and making sure that they've been in contact together. And then quick tip from Siobhan is some receipts fade over time. She's been making a practice of scanning and photocopying the receipts and attaching those to the check request forms.
That's actually very true and a very, very good idea. All right, anybody else? Are we going to move on to the next guy?
Oh, please ask questions. I don't see her on here yet. Oh, she is. Isabella's here. I see her.
Oh, you know what? I got something to kind of add on about Chamberlains and inventories is oftentimes, or in the past, the regalia sheet of your financial report was a pretty good inventory of all of your major things. The pavilions, the big ticket items that your branch may own. But now that society or the IRS has redefined and raised that threshold for what goes on that form, many of all the pavilions and things like that have fallen off. So keeping a regular inventory is even more important now.
Well, and I can add to that is there's a lot of things that's not on your regalia sheet. And you should have, like, because there are people, there's regalia that's out there and other people's homes. You and your Chamberlain should have forms on saying of where those items are and who has them. And that's not just for, when you're asked about your inventory or presented with your inventory, but as those change hands, if something happens to the person that has them, you can take that form to their family member and let them know that you need those items back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think there's even a form for Exchequer records. And that was created after Aquaterra had a very unfortunate incident where our Exchequer passed away unexpectedly. And the rest of her family did not play. So they didn't really understand why we were like, okay, sorry for your loss. Can we have our checkbook back? And, they're grieving and they just think we're all a bunch of weirdos anyways. So there is a form floating out there in which the Exchequer signs off that gives us the right to go, hey, grieving spouse, I know this is a bad time, but here's the agreement your wife signed. Can we please get our stuff back?
It's called baronial possession in home or something to that effect, and it's in the SharePoint group or the SharePoint page.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah, it's called possessions in home. Name of the
I was
file.
going to say, in the best way possible, we are the worst at documenting what we all have. And so that's why there was a few changes that were made right before COVID occurred, just so that we can document what we have. I mean, even as Kingdom Chamberlain, I'm getting emails from out of Kingdom asking me, well, what all do the crowns of Vontier look like? What are all the different crowns? Not just for our king and queen, but also for our prince and principalities. And I don't actually have any documented records of that were done from any of my predecessors. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, especially with the Chamberlain position, where I want to be able to document what we all have, even if it's just an annual basis. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to have all the pictures, but as long as we can start documenting, I feel like we would be safer than sorry.
Yeah.
It is always better to have more documentation than you need, because you can simply ignore what you don't need. And as somebody who, as I said in the break, when I was having just a general conversation, having done forensic accounting of a non-SCA nonprofit organization, the fact that they did not document things, boy, that was not fun for me. So yeah, if all else fails, over document, because it's less time in the long run.
Well, and I can admit, because I'm also the Seneschal of Stromgard, we actually took yesterday as an example for regalia to go through and actually inventory and clean out our trailer. Oy vey. It was fun, it was real, it was stinky all at the same time. We found stuff in there that has been in there for years, that's moldy, that should not be in inventory, that we had to let go. We found things that we didn't even know the barony had. And these are all things that, as Chamberlain, I've been trying to document just so that we have a digital record of it if something happens in the future.
Question, that document, going back to that document that you said, the in-home. for
Possessions in
checkbooks.
home.
Possessions in home, thank you. First of all, first question, is that required to be signed by all branch exchequers as well? Because they also carry checkbooks and things like that, and financial records, etc.
You should.
It should be. Second of all, I had a second part, just a minute. Is that document valid in Canada as well as in the United States? Or does it need to be written differently for a Canadian branch to be using it?
It's not written like a legal document. It's like a, I have these items, and upon my death, you can come get them. I mean,
Okay.
it's a very generic basic.
Okay, thank you.
You could probably always take that item and have it notarized. If it's something that needs to be done, I mean, you could always find it and have, and if it's an exchequer and a branch or a principality, and have the exchequer for the kingdom or the principality or the seneschal or whatever, and then have them all sign it, and then have it, you know, and have it done in front of a notary and have it notarized if it's something that needs to be done to that you feel may need necessary to be able to get that property back.
Okay.
It's especially important to pay attention to all the places where you have to change the document, because this is a template document. So you got to put in, instead of where it says if you're a shire or you're a principality or you're a region, you put that in instead of barony, and you have to put in the name. You know, make sure you fill it out correctly and fully, because it's just a template to fill in. And so more is better.
Great.
And just take, you know, have that and just take it to somebody there in Canada who can tell you, would this work?
Okay, thank you.
Are we ready to move on?
I think so. Isabella, are you ready?
I think as ready as I'm going to get. So Zettel, PayPal, everybody's probably heard PayPal here is going away. As of the 3rd, it's not going to work anymore. So we've gotten, and Tina was nice enough to buy the first Zettel 2 to get to play with. It's the card reader. We're not going to have swipes anymore. They are just tap and chip, so you can insert. And I've tried to go through. Tried to learn without actually having an event to make it complete the functions with, to figure out how we're going to make them all work. Everybody will have a second email, one that comes from Zettel, to set up their user account. So you'll have one for a PayPal account, and that's the only time you'll log into it is when you create your link to the Kingdom account, and then it's Zettel. Everything else will go through Zettel when you're at gate. PayPal pre-registration is still going to run through PayPal just like it has. Kira, I took screenshots. I'm hoping that I can share them.
Yeah, you should be able to share it.
You should be able to share.
There we go. I just had to figure out where it was. Sure. Okay. So my emails when I set up my Zettel one dumped into my spam. So you're going to be looking for when I set you up, you'll get an email from PayPal, and that'll have the username that you'll use to log into PayPal and register your account there. The Zettle account does require an email address to log into. So you want to make sure that that email address has nothing to do with a personal PayPal account, because it will try to reset things. I checked that. Then it goes and gives you, let's get down to business. You activate your Zettle account through the email link. And after you get that set up, the thing that I've discovered, and I'm trying to confirm with PayPal, is that you have to be connected to a card reader the first time to get it to go all the way through. Otherwise, it sits there and says, you're approved, and won't let you go any further. It's enough to drive you nuts. But once you get in there, you'll use staff login once you've got it all set up. And you do your email, your password. This is the first screen that comes up, and it's your sales screen to connect to Zettle, in Zettle. And that's the sell screen. There's a few more pieces to set up to use it the first time. Once you've set up your Zettle account, it holds all the settings. So there's not a huge issue if you're disabled and then re-enabled to use for different events. So these are the settings, and they all of these should be off. They're different methods that they're creating an ability to use, but all of these would be shut off. You have to connect the card reader each time, which is nice because it links the user number to the particular reader, so that there's no accidental Bluetooth connection to the wrong reader if you've got two going. It'll tell you it's connecting, and then the card reader, when you turn it on, gives you a number, and that's the card reader that you're going to connect to. And then it makes you, oops, try using that arrow. Then it gives you a compare and confirm, so that you make sure that you are actually connected to that reader. Then you go back in, and it goes back to your sales. The nice thing about the sales is you can filter it down. I had put a number of different options in there that would be under different categories. And you can filter it down so that you're just using it in a single event. And I can have 3 or 4 events pre-set up. And you just have to filter it to use that one event. Then you click on the item here, and it'll pop up there into the sales cart and do a 1 and tell you what the charge amount is. And then when you're ready to actually have them pay for it, you click the sales shopping cart and you say charge. That sends the link, the information out to the card reader, and they will insert or tap their card, and then it'll pop up the amount, and they have to click the check mark on the reader to confirm it. I think it'll be really nice in the long run. If you don't have all of those settings right, it'll give you an option to invoice, and we don't want to use that. That's what it looks like. Oops, I got that in the wrong spot. Sorry. Then the thing that I've been told is we'll have to keep a separate log or change our sign-ins so that it has the name of the card on it. And once we've completed the transaction, we need to go in and look up the receipt number to make sure that we can track them, because the card reader doesn't track names. Lost my arrows. Or I lost my picture. I'm not sure which. Anyway, you go into the screen here and you click on receipts, and then it'll bring up an option to be able to see what the receipt number is to go with that transaction. Then we'd have to write that down. And I know I just kind of whizzed through, but does anybody have questions, or does anything seem like it's going
So
to be more
instead of
difficult?
writing down times, we're gonna write down the receipt number.
Yep,
That was mine.
yep.
So, having a tablet or using it on one of the tablet that has the NFC capabilities, with Zettel, you don't need to have a reader, but we're not gonna be able to use it that way.
We have to use the reader. We've been told that that's the piece.
Okay. We did, I do know, like at PayPal, when we did PayPal at Kingdom A&S this last month, we had a couple of people, their cards weren't scanning through the readers, and
Mhm.
we were actually able to send them the invoice, and they paid it right there, standing right there. We verified the payment.
Well, and that would be something I would have to ask Aislinn. It's not something that the society directions have said that it's allowed. So I don't know if that would be a piece that we'd have to adjust, or how we want to make that. And that, again, I'm still trying to learn all
yeah.
the pieces. So
Right, and I understand, because with PayPal now, it said, you said they could pay with, we just spent it, and then it came up on the screen as paid. It said when they paid it, it said paid. We used it for like 2 people because their cards weren't scanning, and it worked really well.
and that might be something we look at, but that's not, like I said, it's not something that was in any of the society information that came down.
Siobhan asked availability in Canada. She's looking online right now, but maybe
It should be. I haven't heard that it's not. I can do some more digging on that, but I think PayPal here is gone, period. So I'm pretty sure that it is. The reader.
Siobhan, are you talking the readers, or are you talking the ability to use it?
both.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, if my gut reaction is, if the readers aren't necessarily available, they can be purchased here, and because they're not assigned to anything, they're assigned when they get signed up, right, Isabella?
Yes.
And then using it is just, it's credit card processing, like,
yep,
flat out. I mean, I think this is something that we're going to have to definitely internally update our own way that we're talking about it, and not calling it PayPal at the gate. We're have to talk about credit card, but credit and debit.
Right.
So can we key in, because one of the things that would have helped for your thing, Kira, was just to hand key the credit card number in, which I have done all the time.
Society specifically says not to hand key in, I think because of the room for error in data entry numbers.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I understand, but it did say specifically.
You can't say never, because that, I mean,
right.
that yeah.
Right.
Not best practices if you can help it, but sometimes it's the only option you have.
True.
And if it's a wrong number, I mean, it'll come back being a wrong number, and the wrong name will come up. So.
Right. And again, I haven't seen an actual transaction complete through it, so I don't know what it shows. I know it says that the logs don't track names, but I don't know what it shows on our end when it says complete. I know it pops up and it asks if they want a receipt.
So one of the things I'm going to tell you guys is this is not an inexpensive purchase. And it is something that you will need to discuss with your financial committee if you decide to, excuse me, if you decide to purchase them and have a set for your branch. I purchased it because I run a business, and I bought them because I take credit cards for my bookkeeping business. So I purchased a set, but I always let the Barony of Madrona and the Kingdom play with them. It was about $130 for the stand and for the reader.
So the reader, sorry.
But no, go ahead.
The reader says in the paperwork, it is supposed to function for between 2 and 5 hours or 3 and 5 hours on a single charge. The stand is supposed to let it continue to charge and keep going. I don't know if we can plug in the reader and continue to use it that way, or if it must have the stand to do that. It holds a charge a long time if it's not in use.
But for an event,
But for an event, I don't know how long or how much charge it uses each time it connects and completes the transaction.
Out of curiosity, do you have anyone scheduled to use this before May Crown?
No.
Okay. I'll be your Huckleberry. It's okay.
Oh, well. I have the Kingdom account can order 1 for free. And I'm hoping, since we still haven't gotten Kathy and I all the way switched over, I have to have Kathy call them and see if she can talk them into, if we can get approval into letting us buy more than 1 at a reduced rate, because we are a nonprofit that's having to replace multiples. That's my hope. The other catch is the tablets or the whatever we're using to access Zettel has to run newer than what the current Kingdom tablet has. It's I want to say it's a 5 point something on Android. Some of the newer operating systems, and our Kingdom tablet can't upgrade to it. It's stuck in its current.
It's too old.
It's too old.
Real quick Google search, Samsung tablet, Galaxy Tab A7 Lite, 8.7 inch, 32 gig Wi-Fi, Android, $120. So I would say if the branches are looking at doing this on their own, they're probably looking at about $200 to $250 to step into this.
That's going to be prohibitive to quite a few branches, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree for some branches, but I could see Aquaterra doing this and using it at Ursamus, and
yeah,
it's not
Dragon's Lair.
It's not cost for it. Yeah, Dragon's Lair. The Ontario West War. Well, they don't have signal, but any of the June Fair type,
yeah,
large regular
events.
non-kingdom events, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So Siobhan did find that you can't use PayPal Zettel abroad at this time. I did find that you can only use PayPal, you can only use Zettel in the country where you signed up for it.
Okay.
So it sounds like we won't be able to take the Zettel from the US over to
Canada.
that
Okay.
means putting on my events deputy hat, September Crown will not be able to have credit cards. Neither will July Coronation 2024.
Jeez.
Currently, yeah.
I feel like this is pushing us closer and closer to needing to be separate entities. I hate that, but because no, there's no way really to have a second PayPal account for Canada. Frontier.
That would be a question that we might ask PayPal, is say, hey, we've got branches in Canada. How are you adapting for these that have branches in multiple locations and abroad?
Because that's something that could be done at the principality level, and the principality could filter it down to their branches, have it done that way. But that's probably the only way that's going to fly, I guess, because they're not going to allow branches to have their own logins and stuff.
Right.
But it could happen at a principality level, but that's probably a society level thing that we'll have to get talked about.
Yeah. Of course, usually I know this from past experience with PayPal, the society's like, oh, well, we've not the society at large, but mostly it's like, oh, well, we never thought about things like currency conversion. It's like, welcome to Ontier. Okay, it's a good question for both PayPal and for society, I think.
In Canada.
And I think a lot of the events that we're having here, we usually do dollar for dollar. Like in Canada. Can't think of any time that we, at least in Ramsgard, in our area, we have said, well, we have to figure out what the currency conversion is in order for you to do it.
No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what we're talking about for currency conversion is if someone pays with a credit card down in the US, we don't get the full amount. We get what it was no, it's the other way around. If someone using a credit card in Canada, they're getting more than what the
Siobhan
price is,
here,
right?
I managed the gate for Crown 2018, which was the first time we used PayPal pre-reg in Canada.
Yep.
And it's just the same as if you were coming up here across the border. You pay with American money at gate. We're not going to give you the exchange because we're not a bank.
Right.
However, you pay online, you get the Canadian amount. So you pay with your credit card through PayPal. Today it would be like $4.25 for you instead of $5, that kind of thing.
Right.
It's what PayPal does, not what we do.
Yes, PayPal does that currency conversion for you automatically. And ideally, the account should stay in the Canadian funds account in PayPal. And those of you who are familiar with PayPal, you have separate little accounts. They're just within your account. You leave it in there until the event is over. And just like any other event, you take it to the bank on that day or that kind of thing. So you're only dealing with one exchange rate instead of different exchange rates throughout the day as people sign up and sign off, and they're buying in 3 months early kind of thing.
Yeah. That event was our learning curve.
The user in the US, it is actually cheaper. But for the users in Canada, it levels the playing field, which is what I loved about it. So anyway, signing off.
So I'll need to revamp as soon as we have more slides, the training for PayPal or credit card payments on site as soon as we have more information.
Yeah. And until I can see a transaction complete, I've got pictures of what they're supposed to look like, but they're, little squares on a page, and they're Excel spreadsheets with like 9 to 12 lines. I'm like, okay, magnifying glass.
If I could make a suggestion, you have Make Crown set up. Why are you going to Make Crown? Pay your Make Crown fee.
I am, and I could, and yeah,
with the gate people's approval, of course. But that could be your.
I don't know. She's a little sketchy sometimes.
I know she is, but Thorkel.
Yeah, I could see it all the way through.
This is where I defend my protege. No.
My granddaughter? Yes.
Exactly.
I know, those treats just may not make it all the way to certain places anymore.
But you know what? That's actually a really good idea, because then you could at least see what it's going to look like. Because I know at one point when they first were starting PayPal, they were talking about writing down like a transaction number, which were like 12 digits.
Right, they're ridiculously linked.
No, we're not going to, that's why we came up with doing the time so that we could compare them. And hopefully this receipt number won't be huge for the same reason, but you know, we'll find out if we can do it.
Yeah, I can do that and take pictures as I go so that I see what it looks like.
Yeah. Good idea.
It also might give some more information for the PayPal Society PayPal deputy, because I know when we were going online, you know, she was in Trimaris or something and
Yeah.
had no concept of foreign currency or principalities or
Not using the
anything.
same site.
Not yeah, different events running and being different sites and being different things.
So
If you're printing a receipt for, if you have the option to print a receipt for whoever's paying for it,
I don't
could
think we
you
do.
not also print a receipt for your gate?
You
And then
can send a receipt.
We
Yeah,
can't print them. We don't have printers.
Yeah, it's a whole nother piece of equipment if you want a printer.
Okay. Because I was going to
And
say,
they're
if you
not-
could
and they
print
are
the
not cheap.
receipt or put the receipt where you could see it
Right.
on your tablet, you could change it to the line and the page that is showing up on your gate fee, on your gate.
I don't know if that's an option. I think it's an auto-generated receipt number.
probably. Well, be a guinea pig, and then we'll be more guinea pigs at May Crown, and we'll hopefully figure it all out.
Yeah.
Isn't that how we normally do these things?
Pretty much.
I did the first time, Catherine.
Exactly.
Yep.
I know. You remember.
Actually, you
don't
left it
you?
off
Like,
just in time for somebody else have to be guinea pig on the PayPal on the deputy side.
well, like I've always said, we just kind of make it up as we go along, and I'm good at apologizing.
I'm not afraid to say I'm sorry.
We'll
It's
figure it
fixable.
out.
Well,
do the
it's
best we
fixable.
can.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We got your back.
Oh, wow. Crown event to beta taste the new system. Joy.
Yes. Hey, it started there. We're just morphing to another one. So there we go. Now I definitely have to go to May Crown, so I can definitely have your back.
Yes. Even if
I'm
I have
going,
to
I'm
pick you
going.
up.
I'm going and I'm camping. So there you
Cool.
go.
Any other questions on PayPal, except for the Canada ones? She's gonna check on those.
I'll go do some digging on the Canada side. I honestly didn't even think about that because I'm trying to get this side to work.
All right, so our last thing is questions. There are no stupid questions. Now is the time to ask. One of the things I wanted to put into this section is it's a good time to discuss, well, we've always done it that way. And I was going to start this off for you guys just as an example. I stepped up as Exchequer of Loughnor and everything got handed to me because the previous Exchequer said, I don't want to do it anymore, and threw his hands up and walked away. And everybody kept telling me, well, we always do cash advance. We always do this. I had no idea what I was doing as an Exchequer. And they told me things like, well, we get $50 a month for a budget. It's our budget. Every officer gets $50 a month. It doesn't matter. Or we always hand out cash advance for our events, and then they hand in receipts. But when I took over Exchequer, I had 6 lines of people who had never handed in receipts for some things, and those had to be cleared up for me in my first year of being that Exchequer. So and then the other thing is when I brought in possessions and home and started handing those forms out to people were like, well, what are these? We've never done this. So this is where I kind of wanted to go over some questions that you might have becoming a new Exchequer, or or things that you've heard to help out people coming in being in an Exchequer. Go ahead, Siobhan.
I've had some experience walking into a large box of paper and being told, hey, this is how we do it. Oh, my first and simplest, number one, I suck at training, so I'm loving that you guys are doing this. This is awesome. I tell my trainees whenever I do try and train somebody, read your handbook. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to read it in one sitting. You don't even have to read it in 1 month. Just read it, read it, read it. When you come to something that you don't understand, you'll go, hey, I think I read something about that. And you go back to your handbook. And if your handbook is unclear, you have your principality, you have your baronial, you have your kingdom. Your superiors are there to help you. And frankly, that's how I've gotten along, is whenever I have a question, I ask somebody above me. And generally, they're really happy to talk my ear off about whatever it is that we're geeking out about Exchequer wise. But the big thing is, read your handbook, stay up to date on your financial policies. It's boring, it's dry, but it's so much better to have a little bit in your brain before you start than going at it and trying to memorize everything all at once, because you just can't. That's my 2 bits.
Anything? Questions? If anybody thinks of anything, we do have the Exchequer's Facebook page. If you're not on it, please go ahead and make sure you ask to join it. I am also on Discord, so always there to just make sure I'm on Discord as Kira, so you can tag me if you have any questions. If you're not on Facebook, I am available there too.
For those of you who aren't in the Facebook group, I just posted the link to it in the chat so you can follow it and join. It is literally just on tier Exchequers. Although sometimes I think we should change it to Exchequers Anonymous, or some sort of
If you
support group.
Yes.
email epay@ontier.org and if I don't have the answer, I will dig up any answers I can for PayPal stuff.
There's also the PayPal, the PayPal Frontier Facebook page.
Forget about that one.
Which also legitimately should be changed to like credit card or non-cash or something else, because
PayPal does 2 parts now.
We are looking at a live training. We're looking at July 29th at this point right now. We're gonna try to keep it as central as possible. So if people want to come from the north and people want to come from the south. And hopefully live is being in person is great because you get to meet everybody face to face, and also you after you start going over the report a couple times and the little nuances with it, you start to get more questions.
Everybody remember, when you go to a live training, bring the preferred caffeine and cookie for your trainer.
I think Frank, you can stop the recording, please, sir. You have something?